Welcome to the Samson Strength Coach Collective. On today's episode, we have Ty Curtis, Assistant Director of Olympic Strength and Conditioning at FAU. I really love this conversation. And again, I mentioned it last week with Ryan's episode. I really appreciate coaches who are vulnerable and share things that can genuinely help other coaches. So one of the coolest things that we talk about is how Ty reflects on his own coaching, what he does to make sure that he is living up to his principles that he applies for his athletes, which is an incredibly valuable thing to do, right? I think it's tough on a daily basis to say, okay, I came in and did exactly what I asked my athletes to do every single day. And he talks about it not only from the coaching standpoint and reflecting on his own coaching, but also from a physical standpoint and how he transitioned from powerlifting into more athletic movements so he can demo the movements correctly. And so this is a coach who really cares and really wants to do a great job and is doing a great job. And I love how he laid out a blueprint for other coaches on exactly how to do it. So I really appreciate Ty for coming on, and I appreciate you as a listener. As always, thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoy. What's going on, Samson Strength Coach Collective listeners? On today's episode, we have Ty Curtis, Assistant Director of Olympic Strength and Conditioning for Florida Atlantic University. Ty, thank you so much for coming on, man.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you having me on.
I'm always excited to meet new coaches, but then the excitement increases when it's people with a 315 area code. It always kind of lights me up a little bit when I get to see and when I text you pre-show. Obviously, you were a VVS grad. I'm from CBA, two very different schools when it comes down to it.
Most definitely. Actually, a lot of the kids at my school would leave to go to your school. So, I mean,
yep.
I don't blame them.
And we claimed that we never recruited, but that's I disagree with that 1,000%. Well, also, man, look, I'm really excited to dive into it. I've obviously heard great things about you from Zane as well, who was a previous guest on the show. But I'm excited to hear your side of the story. So, can you just give us a breakdown of your career and then what's brought you to FAU?
Yeah. I was fortunate enough. I think a lot of strength coaches share a similar story. We were probably mediocre athletes, got into the weight room, became a lot better, and, kind of fell in love with the weight room in the process of getting better as an athlete. And then there's a career in this, so might as well do that. Fortunately, I got my start with my high school strength coach. He actually just trained me for free when I was first starting out, when I was in like a sophomore in high school, I believe it was. And then once I started kind of getting into the college side of things, he let me come back and do my first internship with him for a summer up in Canastota, New York. So shout out to Todd Kuchery. He's still alive and kicking up there and doing the deal. But so I got that in like 2012, I think. And then I was fortunate enough to kind of know what I wanted to do for most of my life. I think I was like 15 when I was like, all right, this is what I'm going to end up doing. So moved on from there, and then got my first like real big time internship, I guess you could say, at Syracuse football back in 2016. Then from there went to Rochester Institute of Technology, and the reason I went to the D3 side of things, partly because of logistics, but one of the coaches at Syracuse was like, hey, if you want to be a really good coach, you really want to be able to do this for a long time, coach at the D3 level, because they're going to, even if you're an intern, they're probably going to put you in charge of something. And fortunately enough, Coach Brian was nice enough to put me in charge of baseball, wrestling, and cheerleading. So I got 3 teams to myself, and it was kind of all downhill from there. And then went from RIT to Shippensburg University, where that was a very interesting experience because we were kind of doubling as a local prep school strength staff, as well as the interim strength coaches for Shippensburg University, because they were still in the hiring process of that whole deal. So did that for about 3.5 months, and then came back, worked in the private sector for a little while, moved to Philly, worked in the private sector there, and then actually got into another Division III school, Widener University, and I was in charge of baseball and football there. And then did some programming and stuff like that for the volleyball team. And then from there, went on to H2F and worked at Fort Bragg, now known as Fort Liberty. Spent about 7 months there, and then I got my call from Zane to come take this position, and I've been here ever since.
This, I can tell you right now, this conversation would drive my fiance insane if we were not on a
Yeah.
podcast, right? Because I don't know if you have a significant other and it's the same way, but when we talk about upstate New York, right? And you talk about Syracuse,
Yep.
Rochester, Ithaca, all these places that we've all lived, like she hates it because it's somewhat of a like, everybody moves away from it, right? So you'll run into people
Yeah.
from upstate New York in the wild, and then you get to talk about all these things. It just drives her nuts. And then you throw in Philly on top, which I went to Temple, so I lived there for 4 years as well.
Mhm.
Like I think she would have a full blown aneurysm because I would be
Yeah.
nerding out right now.
Yeah. I mean, they're all great places, man. I mean, there are definitely aspects, especially around this time of year, right? It's November, like
Mm.
where the upstate New York in you really kind of sets back in, and you really like, man, I kind of miss it right now. Um, Fortunately, the weather here in South Florida is finally broken, and we're not like too bad in terms of like the heat, humidity, all that stuff. Because that was starting to wear on me a little bit, but it's a good place, man.
Oh yeah, and that's certainly one thing I've noticed too is that dealing with the cold is absolutely no problem. The heat, I'm absolutely horrible. Like I just turn into a useless body at that point. How did you get hooked up with free strength and conditioning in high school?
So Todd was an alumni of BVS, so my high school, and he was an all-state wrestler. Actually played at Syracuse for a little while. Was a backup safety, I believe. And then he just kind of wanted to come back, and he was already training one of the guys on the team. He was training our middle linebacker, and kind of saw me in the weight room, and I'm sure he probably looked at me and was like, "What the hell is that kid thinking right now?" So I think came from a place of like, oh, this kid like genuinely wants to work. He's by himself in the weight room, but he's doing everything wrong. So why don't I just go ahead and help him? And then he just kind of asked me that day, like, hey, you want to tag along with Colin, and we'll get you rolling on some training and stuff like that. And I grew up in a single parent household, so money was pretty tight, especially back then. So I was like, I really appreciate it, but if I don't know if my mom's gonna be able to do much in terms of like being able to pay you. I mean, I bale hay on the weekends, but I don't know how much you charge. Um, and so he was like, "Don't worry about it." And then he just for the next 3 years, almost, I think, just nothing out of pocket. He just enjoyed training us, and that was kind of really the start of everything for me, where it's like, all right, like the selflessness, the servant leadership, like these kids just genuinely need help, and I believe that they can make it if they got the proper guidance and everything like that. So I think that from the coaching side of things, just being able to experience that at a young age was absolutely huge for me. And then as I started getting more into it and getting better at the exercises and everything like that, I started asking about like, hey, what's the methodology? What's like the purpose behind all this kind of stuff? Because I'm not very much of a guy. Like I got to know what I'm doing or the reason why I'm doing something, or else I'm probably not going to be all that bought in. And he was more than gracious enough to tell me, hey, this is why it's happening, all that kind of stuff. And he had some great connections. We went to training camps together. We watched film. It was far more than just the typical like strength and conditioning relationship. Like, oh, you're in the weight room, get out, see you later. Like he spent a lot of time with us. So that was just kind of how he is, I think. And he's just a great guy.
Those types of interactions early on always just kind of blow my mind. Like who's to say that without him you wouldn't have ended up being a strength coach? I think that's you hadn't have no clue or idea of how to track that. But at the
Mhm.
same time, like being able to meet people when you were younger who influence you and show you the process of the weight room and how it can help you, not only from a physical standpoint, but from a mentality, just the process of, I guess, the process, understanding that it's a grind and what you put into it is exactly what you get out of it, which is my favorite part of the weight room as well. I think back to, we had somebody who was an exercise science grad. I think he got a stipend from school and his job was just to hang out in the weight room. And at the end of the day, and basically like he was a little bit of a passive guy, but fantastic to speak with. And so I remember started asking him questions one day. And all of a sudden he kind of poured into me, and then we were able to develop a really strong relationship, and I got way more out of those experiences than I ever thought I would. And so I thought I was going to be a sports psych for the longest time, right? Like I always thought that part was cool, but at the
Mhm.
end of the day, back to my experiences and when I had the most fun in my career, it was always within the weight room. So those people foster really, really important moments for individuals who eventually go into strength and conditioning. I think that always is so cool to hear about.
Yeah. No, definitely. I mean, we kind of, it's maybe it's a little cheesy, but we stand on the shoulders of giants, right? And it doesn't have to be a Tom Landry or, for our industry, maybe like a Scott Cochran type of person. Like it could be your next door neighbor. And I mean, he lived in the just next town over, and he did everything he could for me.
Yeah, that's just amazing. And so you mentioned too about being a better coach by coaching at the D3 level, right? Getting the opportunity to actually coach early and be able to run a full program for yourself. I've heard the same advice, especially when we talk about football internships at the beginning. I remember I was convinced I was going to be the next Scott Cochran, right? Because it's the first person I ever saw on video, and so I
Right.
wanted to go to
Right.
Alabama and intern. And they explained to me very quickly that if there's 20 other interns in a program, you're probably not going to be doing much. How was the
Mhm.
experience for you coaching at the D3 level?
Awesome. I mean, it was really like, I'm really thankful I got that perspective, because I think, some of, and maybe I'm going to alienate some people with this comment, but if you spend your entire career on the large school side of things, or like the professional side of things, you only get that perspective. And depending on the situation you're in, right? Like, I mean, if I'm going to a Clemson, in theory, right, they're thoroughly vetted, like they got money for everything. Uh, your problems are very limited, or your problems are very niche, and at that level, on the Division 3 level, you got all the problems. Like, you got lack of funding, you got lack of help, you got too many hours, you got lack of pay, you got lack of staff. Like, so it was very interesting to be able to see that. And Brian was so awesome about kind of empowering us as coaches, as young coaches, when that honestly we didn't know what we were doing. Like, we did the best we could. We kind of followed his lead and everything like that. But in the grand scheme of things, we thought we knew what we thought we knew, but we really did. So him being able to be like, hey, and this is what I tell our interns as well. It's, you're an extension of the staff. You're going to come here, you're going to coach, and you're going to actually be in charge of this stuff. Yes, I'm going to vet your programs. Yes, I'm going to take a look at them, but I'm not going to handhold you, and I'm not going to babysit you. So make sure that you're here on time. If I'm giving you a key to my weight room, you're going to show up on time. You're going to show up early. You're going to get everything set up, like all the stuff that we're all pretty used to at this point. But in a system that doesn't matter, right? Because it's Division 3, right? The kids aren't there on scholarship; they're completely there for like volunteer sake. But I mean, I had guys go to bigger schools because they did so well at Division 3, and now they're at Division 1. Okay, well, now does it matter? Or like, it mattered back then too. It mattered at the Division 3 level, and if they didn't have that opportunity on the Division 3 level, if I didn't do the best that I could for them, then maybe they're not in that big position where it's like I'm all in this coaching thing because um you want to see the dreams come true, right? Like, for me, like, they didn't necessarily come true for me, but I'm okay with that, because if I can put somebody else in a position to succeed and accomplish their dreams, that's all I need. You know what I mean? So um the Division 3 level was insane. I mean, being at a Division 3 school during COVID as well, like, that is one of the more unique experiences that I think I'll ever have. Because I was a private contractor, I wasn't officially like working for the school. Like, I wasn't a staff member. I was an outside consultant, but I was coaching there, and so kind of having to follow the the rules of the school, but also follow, like, all right, I'm a private contractor, like, you know, I got certain things that I got to do. Like, I can only be here for a certain amount of time, all that kind of stuff. So you got to see the business side of that as well. And it was a very unique and awesome experience.
It's one of my mentors was previously worked with University of Wisconsin Whitewater, right, which is a D3 powerhouse.
Okay.
highly
Yeah, they're
successful
insane.
program. Yeah. He said that it was probably the most fun that he's ever had while coaching was at the Division III level, just because of the
Mhm.
attitude of the players and how they approach their work. Because like we've talked about, I think it's maybe even pre-show, was essentially you don't have necessarily the same resources, and the travel is going to be a little bit tougher. And you do the exact same things as
Yep.
a Division I program, just maybe less fans and maybe less of an outcome that you would expect to see at Power Five school. Do you feel like your
Mhm.
players worked harder? Was it a more fun experience for you? Not to put you on blast with your players that you have currently, but was that the vibe that you had at Division III level?
Oh, I guess that's a great question. So I've been fortunate enough to work with baseball for the majority of my collegiate strength and conditioning career. So I have found that for the most part, top to bottom, baseball, especially now, maybe it didn't always used to be this way, but they get after it in the weight room. Like it's almost like training like a football team in a lot of ways, which is why I love it so much because they're they're smart, they work hard, they're all stats driven, so it's really easy to get them motivated. I just got to post up one little leaderboard thing, and the session is going to go through the roof. Um, all that kind of stuff. So I mean, I feel like, but at the Division III level, it is certainly a different animal because they are there just for the sake of being there, and because they love the sport so much. They're willing to dedicate as much time as they possibly can to it. Um, where at the Division III level, I had to hold a lot of kids back.
Mm.
Where sometimes on this level, on the Division I level, I have to kind of pull people along just a little bit. Um, maybe like early on in the career because they're not necessarily used to the college lifestyle just yet. Um, but or maybe there's like at the end of their career they're kind of burnt out, they're kind of over it. I never really got that from the Division III level. It was like everything was urgent, which kind of comes back to my one of my coaching principles is urgency, and the Division III guys just kind of represented that in droves. Kind of no matter the sport, really. Um, I tell people if you really want to get like see people get after it, work with some Division III wrestlers and watch that happen. Like you don't need to say anything; you just put it in front of them, and they're gonna do it. And so it was one of the most fun experiences. I'm gonna agree with your mentor because it was one of the most fun experiences I've had coaching, and I wasn't getting paid a dime for it, and I was like, you know what, I could do this. I could do this for the rest of my life.
That's awesome, and it makes me think of what our head coach here will say all the time too. Is like, uh, with this group, we don't have to coach anything that's not basketball, right? And when we get to just coach
Mhm.
basketball, it's a lot of fun, and we can make sure that we actually improve. And same thing within the weight room, right? Like my principles, I hate coaching effort, right? If you're going to be within the
Yeah.
weight room, I want you to be giving me your all at all times. So it just brings me back to that thought of when I don't have to coach effort, we can have a lot more fun.
Yeah. Yeah. No, yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, it's interesting on this level too, because like, um, FAU in terms of where we're at, we're still a growing program in a lot of ways, from top to bottom, and it doesn't necessarily matter the sport. So we still have those kids that almost have that like D3 mentality that want to make it to like the next level. I mean, I don't know if Zane said this on the last podcast, so I'll try not to repeat stories. But I mean, we went from, and when I tell you it was the worst weight room in America, it really truly was. It was like we had potholes in the floor, we had busted out barbells, all that kind of stuff, and stuff was 20, 30 years old. To now, what I would put our weight room up against just about anybody's. And thanks to you guys and Samson and everything like that. So we're still very much a growing program. So that mentality of like, no, like we still got to make do with what we have is still there.
That's awesome. And again, it just makes it more fun at the end of the day when you're hungry, right? And my favorite quote
Right.
is, "It's hard to get out of bed when you sleep in silk sheets." Right? At the end of the day, there has to be a
Yep.
certain hunger for you. You mentioned your coaching principles. What other coaching principles do you have?
So similar. I mean, along with the effort thing. So it's urgency, effort, and attitude. It's kind of the three pillars that I go off of. And I just tell everybody, like, those are the three things you can control every single day. So show up with those. Show up with a sense of urgency. Like, don't be quick, or be quick but don't hurry. The old John Wooden adage. We only have a certain finite amount of time in the weight room, on the field, if we're doing speed stuff or conditioning or anything like that. So you got to get to the spot. You got to get there fast. You got to know what you're doing. You got to listen. Because there's nothing that drives me more nuts than explaining something to somebody, writing it up on the board, having multiple places where, like, all right, this is exactly how I want it to run, and then we still go, we don't really know where we're going. So that for me is tough. So, like, it all comes back to that urgency side of things, and then the effort is, have a great effort. I shouldn't have to coach effort. You should want to be here. It's a privilege to play Division I athlete, baseball, athletics, speech, whatever the case may be. And then attitude, just making sure that you have a great attitude every single day. And I try to tell the players, it's great to have a good attitude, but I don't need you to be phony about it. Like, I don't need you to be like a fake rah-rah guy or anything like that. Be yourself, have a great attitude within yourself, but more so, like, be a great teammate. If somebody needs, hey, could you switch the dumbbells out for me? Grab dumbbells for them. Hey, can you make sure that 145's on the bar next set? Make sure that it's on there for them. Make sure you're spotted. Make sure you're doing all those little things that may not seem like they matter right now, but they're going to matter as we grow this thing. So those are kind of my three big pillars.
How do you follow up with the players on those pillars? Because I think, again, those are fantastic, and I would probably align on every single one of those. How do you follow up with the players on it, especially like on the attitude aspect? I think of, as I've gotten older, it's been much easier for me to be able to check myself on my attitude, right? And instead of just getting upset and then letting it ruin the rest of what I'm trying to do for the day, I've been able to do it a lot better. But when I was 18, 19, I mean, a bad day might ruin the whole week, right? How do you follow up with these players on it?
I think you kind of hinted to it there. It starts with me. I got to make sure that I'm coming in and I'm the consistent, like, side of things. Like, I'm the captain of the ship or whatever, right? So make sure that, like, hey, I'm coming in with a good attitude. I'm coming in with good effort and urgency, and making sure that, like, hey, I'm explaining these things properly so that they understand. So for me, it always starts with me. Because if I'm not representing those things, then why would they? So, and then checking in on that, like, it's having those conversations, like pulling a guy aside, like, hey, is everything all right? Like, hey, this looks painful today. Are you just pushing through to push through, or is something actually going on? And being able to kind of, I don't even really know how to describe it, honestly. Like, coming in and out of a session, where I, like, all right, all eyes are on me, and then let them do the work, and then I float in kind of when is appropriate. If a guy needs help, if guys do something wrong, if a guy is not giving great effort, how can I get through to him and make it not that way? Make it so that they can actually enjoy the session. For my guys, I mean, they absolutely love the weight room. So I'm probably a bad person to ask, because they almost never come in with a bad attitude. There's a couple of guys here and there, man. They typically are the younger guys. But our older guys are much better at policing that sort of stuff. They don't necessarily do it within the session, but I know they do it out in the practice field. I know they talk a lot of garbage and talk a lot of smack to each other, and that kind of gets somebody in the right headspace. So for me, yes, it's about, like, steering the ship, but also I want them to know that, like, hey, this is your team as much as it is mine, if not more. So it shouldn't always have to come from a coach. It shouldn't always have to come from somebody that's the authority. You should be able to police this yourself. If something's not going the way that you don't want it to go, then it's on you to fix it, right? Nobody's coming here to save you. No one's gonna figure it out for you. Same thing with if you're not doing well in classes, right? Like, you can go to all the tutoring you want, but you got to put in the work. Um, so don't let somebody else jeopardize your dream. And you guys want to win a championship. All right, well, is this championship level effort? Is it championship level heart? Is it the stuff that you know in your heart of hearts? Because I really think most people know right from wrong and what wins a championship ultimately, even if they haven't done it yet. I think we can all kind of make an inference of, oh, this is probably championship level effort, and then we know what it's not. So when it's not, can you go out there and fix it? Now I will do that, and I tell my players all the time, like, I will pull you as close to the finish line as I possibly can, but it's your job to cross it. So it's got to be on you.
And so you mentioned it starts with you as well, which I agree with as a coach. I think you set the tone for each session. At the end of the day, when we have a bad session, 9 times out of 10, I'll look back to my own attitude, right, and my own
Mm-hmm.
effort level going into it, and I find out it's not where it needs to be. How do you maintain a high level of your principles for yourself? Do you have a self evaluation process? Do you have something that you do personally to make sure that you are living up to those standards every day?
So for me, it's yeah, it's it. So I actually have a reflection journal. Um, as cheesy as that may sound, but it's actually right here. Um, and I don't do it every day because I don't necessarily feel like I need to. But when I do feel like I need to do it, then I open it up and write it right in there. And um, it's a really good gauge for me. Like, all right, I try to check in on myself as a coach and check in on the guys from a cycle to cycle standpoint. So I try to blend it with, I guess, the science or whatever. So usually I program in 3 week waves. So at the end of that third week, I'll open this up and then, like, all right, what was good about it? What was bad? What was going through my head? And how could it be better? So I have that, and then I have another one at home that's a little bit like more of a personal one. It's like more of all encompassing. This is kind of just my FAU one, and then the other one's like the Power Journal from Andy Frizzle, I believe his last name is the first one guy, and he's got a bunch of like prompting questions in there, like was today a good day? Did you accomplish these 5 things? All that sort of stuff. And if I didn't, then you mark it as a loss or you mark it as a win. And in theory, you're trying to stack as many wins as you possibly can. So it's just kind of being brutally honest with yourself, which I think a lot of people are nervous, afraid, apprehensive, whatever the word may be, um, on being honest with themselves. Like, because I think we're all our own toughest critic to a point. Because once somebody else kind of comes in and interjects and like, hey, like you need to do, but I've noticed a lot of people tend to get a little like apprehensive about that, or like, oh, whoa, dude, like that's not cool. That's like, so if you can do that and beat somebody to the punch to that with yourself, I think you're going to be in a much more calm state. Because not only have you addressed that with yourself, but you can come back if something does come up and it's already something you've talked to yourself about. You can provide solutions to whoever has the issue with it. You know, we work in coaching, so I have to answer to coaches all the time. I have 10 bosses essentially, right? So if somebody has an issue with me or has an issue with a session or disagrees with something that I'm programming or disagrees with, hey, like has a suggestion, rather than take that personally, it's like, well, if I've already beaten you to the punch to it and I've addressed that with myself, okay, then we can have an actual conversation. And like, why are you suggesting that? Why, like, rather than being a completely emotional, reactive response, it's more of a solutions oriented response. So I try to check in on myself and just be as brutally honest as I possibly can. And what are some things I liked? What some things I hated? Um, did I do a good job in terms of leading the session? And I think too, like, being in charge of interns and just seeing them and how they operate makes it a lot easier for me to kind of get into that headspace, because it's like, oh, I'm seeing myself in 4 different forms just about every day. different stages, different stages of the career or whatever. But it's like, oh, that I made that same mistake when I was their age. Oh, I still sometimes like make that mistake. So that they've really kind of helped me out. Don't tell them that, but they've helped me out a lot in that aspect.
I just don't think it's cheesy at all. I understand, and especially within this profession like strength and conditioning, where there can be sometimes this upfrontness of masculinity, right? And so I understand completely why you would say it may be cheesy, right, to have a reflection journal or the power journal. But at
Mm,
the end of the day, like athletes watch film, right, and they
mm,
understand. Okay, in this situation, I probably could have taken this outlet and that would have produced a better result, right? And as a former athlete, and you understand, and like, hey, maybe I should have done this. That would have been better, right? But then to get full feedback and actually break down a situation, it really synthesizes in your brain, helps you understand. Okay, here's how I should approach these situations in the future, and here's how I know how to get better.
yep.
I think that reflection aspect is probably the best thing that we can have as coaches, right? Because like the only other option would be somebody following us around with a camera the whole day, right? And that would probably end up changing
Right.
how we coach. And so, why not reflect at the end of the day, and why not try to, like you said, be brutally honest with yourself? Because at the end of the day, there's been a lot of things in my career I've been self conscious about, right? Like the first thing ever was conditioning because I never played basketball. I didn't know how in shape you had to be to play basketball. And, we
Mm-hmm.
were doing classic football conditioning, which obviously you get to rest every 5 seconds or so. And so I had no
Mm-hmm.
clue how to run it. And so I was very self conscious about my conditioning. I kind of just let it happen and then just every day would just be anxious about it. Right. And that was a really important lesson for me to learn and as a young coach, because I could then understand, okay, once I actually took action and improved this part of my career and of myself as a coach, I feel way better. And I go in feeling way more confident as a coach every day. And so it took a reflection process for me to get better. And then understanding, okay, well, what about conditioning? Because conditioning is a giant subject for me to just broach, right? And then just say, okay, let me break it down. And so I went subject by subject and understood, okay, specifically within basketball, what I need to do. Okay, I'm looking more about aerobic power intervals and things like that. And all of a sudden, I feel way more confident about it now. And it makes me just better as a coach as a whole. But without the reflection process, I wouldn't have had that experience. And I had to answer to coaches. And I think, like you said, it increased the emotion tenfold because I'm already beating myself up about it, right? I'm already
Right.
upset about it. I already know it's a glaring problem within a program that I directly have control of. And then to hear from
Mm-hmm.
somebody else, it's like, it's almost like one of those, like I know this is a problem. Like I'm already freaking out about it internally. I don't need somebody else coming in and saying this, right? But reflecting allowed me to then have these conversations and then take control of conversations in a way I didn't really expect in the future, right? Like conditioning now and how I approach it and how I talk about it with the coaches. Before I'd kind of, because I wasn't confident, just be like, well, like whatever you really want to do, I just want to make you happy, right? And then now I'm willing to have conversations that I think are more beneficial and say, hey, I don't think we need to condition 4 days per week in April because by the time we start playing basketball, everybody's going to have stress fractures, right?
Right.
It allowed me to be a better result for the athletes, but then better as a coach too. And I feel like it really just helped relieve a lot of anxiety I had from coaching as well.
Yeah. No, definitely. 'Cause- and it's interesting too, like especially if you have multiple. So I have three different sports, all vastly different personalities from a head coaching perspective. Um, but the easiest thing that I can do is make sure that kind of what you were alluding to, I think, is knowing the game and knowing the demands of the game. And then fortunately I have softball and baseball, so it's basically the same thing in a lot of different ways. Um, but beach is completely different. Like it's, just, and there's very limited research. There's not a lot of answers. There's not a lot in terms of being able to help you out. And I'm in a very fortunate place that our head coach knows that. And he's like, I know there's not money in it. I know it's a brand new NCAA sport. It's not even been around for 10 years. Like, but it's very, very popular and it's going to get there, but research is always super behind. So, he's like, I don't know what the answers are, Ty. So we got to figure out what the answers are together and what are the best answers for our team. And that's been awesome because it's kind of putting the onus on me and putting the responsibility on me, but understanding that it's a collaborative effort, which is from a strength coach support staff perspective. That's all I could ever ask for. Um, And then, there's certain aspects of like our baseball coach. He loves the weight room. He respects the weight room, but he's the first person to tell me, he's like, I don't know anything about it. That's that's your job. Like, I'm not gonna get in your way. I'll give you some suggestions every now and then, like based on what I'm seeing at practice. Like, hey, guys are dog tired. Like, maybe we take it easy on them. But I'm never gonna get in your way. I'm never gonna step on any of your toes. Like, I have no interest in looking at programs or anything like that. That is completely and totally your job. And our softball coach is the exact same way. So that's been awesome to be able to work with. And but again, it's very, very, very different personalities on like a day-to-day basis. So yeah, I mean, for me too, with like the buy-in sort of stuff, I think one of the huge things for me is getting back. So I used to powerlift, um, and we all know how that goes. I think I ballooned up to 230, 235 at my biggest. Um, Constantly inflamed, felt terrible. Was drinking about 650 milligrams of caffeine a day. Um, and then yeah, I was strong. Okay, I guess I looked the part, but I couldn't demo anything athletic anymore.
Mhm.
Like, all the stuff that I had from track and field, like that was long gone. So the biggest thing that I've been doing like the last year is like, all right, I'm gonna get down to a healthy athletic build, and I'm gonna start doing athletic stuff again. I may not be an athlete anymore, but I'm gonna start doing some athletic stuff because it's gonna help me demo stuff that I want the guys to do. And not only that, it's maybe I'll end up feeling better. And turns out that both of those things have happened. So um, as much as I hate it, social media is here to stay, and I'm not particularly good at it, and I'm not consistent about it at all. But some of the most traction I've gotten with the guides, at least this year, was when I posted my goals for the start of the semester, and um, I wanted to be able to throw 85 miles an hour on a crow hop without blowing out my arm, and then run 20 miles an hour, be 210 at about 10% body fat, and then be able to dunk a basketball. And some of those things I've been able to do in the past, and like I've never thrown anywhere close to 85. Um, but guys are like, oh, we need to go play catch. Like, let's get you on the mound. Let's start getting you to do that sort of stuff. So been out there a couple of times and actually been like a participant in post practice stuff. So that's been absolutely huge in terms of being able to kind of come back to the guys and like relate to them a little bit better. It's like, hey, like I know how this feels. Like, how's your arm feeling? Like, it's like, coach, it feels awful. It's like, all right, let's make a modification in the weight room because I know you're telling me the truth because I know how that actually feels. So
Well, I think that it opens up a little bit of vulnerability for you as well too, right? And
yeah,
understanding like I used to fear and think that, I had to be this perfect person at all times, right? And for the athletes to see, like, okay, I need to be 100% perfect all the time just so they can have a great example and they can know, okay, well, CA or whatever they call me is on top of his stuff, right? But once I started, like you mentioned, sharing my goals with the athletes and say, hey, I'm working on this in my free time. Like, this is what I want to do. I want to get better. A couple of years ago, the big thing was jujitsu, right? They always asked me about
mhm,
jujitsu and how it was going and how my competitions were going. And because they liked hearing that, I'm asking you to do all this stuff to improve. Am I, as a coach, actually doing stuff to improve as
yep,
well too? So I love that vulnerability aspect because it used to scare me, and then now I found out it actually just greatly increases relationships with the athletes.
yeah, yeah. I think it's just a good barometer. It just allows us to be able to, again, just be able to relate to them. If like there was nothing that I hated more as an athlete, and maybe this is kind of getting into the competitive side of me or whatever, but like just thinking about high school two a days, and you got your overweight coach that just your offensive lineman that's just making you run gassers and all that kind of stuff till you puke, and it's like, dude, if you ran one of these, you'd pass out. It could be
Mhm.
over for you. And so like that for me as an athlete was always tough to wrap my head around. So I've always hated like I was like when I started getting to that point, like, okay, yeah, I'm still lifting heavy weight or whatever, but um, I couldn't move. Like, so it was like I started kind of getting into I'm like, dude, what are you doing? Like, is this really worth it? Are you doing this the right way? Like, you got athletes that you're responsible for, and you have a reputation to uphold it to a certain extent. So that's like the easiest way that you can kind of create buy-in. I think for me, it's just like having your actions meet your words.
Hey, I think a really important thing you brought up too is just like your actual physical demonstration sometimes just really truly affects the lift as well. Like
Oh yeah.
we were teaching power cleans, and it was funny because on my catch on the second pull, I noticed that I bent my elbows early, pulled too early, right, and then
Mm-hmm.
all of a sudden all my athletes are all pulling too early as well, right,
Yep.
and it's like it's one of these things that's a good reminder. Just understand like okay, a lot of these people are visual learners too, so they're going to
Mm-hmm.
mimic exactly what you do. And so if you can't really do the athletic stuff, and if I'm asking for fast ground contact time, and my ankles are screaming because I'm trying to do go off the ground quickly, right? It's going to
Mm-hmm.
look different, and then the athletes are going to try to do it the same way, and they're
Yep.
perfectionists, so they're going to want to do it exactly how you demoed it. So I think that's something that people don't necessarily touch on a lot, but is highly valuable to your coaching too.
Yeah, for sure. I truly learned that at Shippensburg and Scotland Prep. And our director Travis, he was like, dude, you got to be good at this stuff because it will look exactly the same.
Yeah.
Right to your point, like they will do it exactly the same. And then the thing that I've noticed, the better the athlete, the better at mimicking you are.
Hmm.
They are. So if I screw up the demo, they did a perfect mimicry of that screwed up demo, like rather than just doing it themselves. So for me, like when I couldn't jump anymore, or I couldn't really sprint, or I had terrible technique, or power clean's a great example. I hadn't power clean since just after college, um, and it all looked terrible. I'm like, why am I can't program any of this because I can't demo it myself. So um, yeah, it really is wild how quickly a session can devolve if I gave it like a bad demo to the point where like going back to that vulnerability point, it's like I'll get right back up on the box or right in front of the hurdle again. Like, nope, that was terrible. Like, discount that one. It's got to look like this, and then I'll try to hit it again and give a better demo of that because it's just not worth rolling with the bad demo.
Yeah, I have no problem with telling my athletes like, "Hey, not like I just did right there. Okay, let me give you a better
There
one."
you go.
Because I mean,
Yep.
sometimes I've hit some terrible exercises before, and it can be soul crushing for myself. They have no clue how bad it was, but I do it
Mhm.
deep down. You mentioned running the intern program as well too, and I think that can be one of the most rewarding parts of the job is
Mhm.
helping out interns and watching them grow and watching them kind of make things click. What is like your main focus with the interns, and what's like the main thing that you try to drive with them?
So for the interns, the first thing that I don't necessarily care about. I mean, I do, but I don't necessarily care about the X's and O's or periodization schemes or all that, right? That'll come, but I'll share with you my methodology and why I do things a certain way and all that kind of stuff. But eventually you're going to become your own coach and you're going to want to do it your way anyway. So yeah, you can cherry pick from me. Like that's exactly what I did. Like there were certain things I liked from certain coaches that I kept and have never gone away. And then there's other things that I just completely discarded. So, um, I want them to know that they are an extension of the staff and that they are going to coach and they are going to be put in uncomfortable positions and that they got to be ready for those positions because there's a lot of folks that'll come in and be like, yeah, I want to be a coach. And then they kind of get in for 2-3 weeks and like, oh, I, I don't want to do this. And I need you guys to be honest with me. Like, I understand that this is a 14-week internship program, but if you get into week 2, week 3, week 4, and all right, this isn't for you, no hard feelings, and we can move on. I'm glad you came. I'm glad you learned at least a couple of things because I really do think some things with coaching and strength and conditioning in particular, like those are lifelong lessons. Those are things that you can carry with you no matter what industry you go into. Um, but you're going to coach and you're going to be uncomfortable a lot. Like one of the drills that I do, um, that again I got from Travis Scott he's now at Mount St. Mary's. Is I'll blast the speaker like as loud as it possibly goes, and then they have to spell their name out, and they have to sit on the other side of the room and be able to yell loud enough to the point where I can hear them spell their name, and they spell it out word for word, and then I write it up on the board based on what I heard. And then to try to make it a little bit of a competition. I don't do short names, or at least I try not to, depending on, what their actual name is. So if you're Jake, you're going by Jacob, right? So we have to go through the whole name and everything. And then the winner is the one that's the closest in spelling. So that's like one drill that some people are super uncomfortable with. The first day, our first practical is always how to blow a whistle. Kind of going back to like the demo type of stuff, being able to call attention to yourself and immediately, and kind of like the science behind, the communication side of things with being able to blow a whistle, because you'd be shocked the amount of people that don't know how to blow a whistle. We start from like the most bare rudimentary roots from a coaching perspective, and then build out from there. And that's something that I had to learn, that this is a better way of doing this than how I was doing it before. How I was doing it before is like I'd slam them with all the science stuff and periodization models and all that, and then their heads would be spinning, but then they have no way to actually practically apply that because they're not programming for any of the teams here, but they are coaching. So why don't I get them involved with the actual coaching side of things? Like, hey, spot this way. Hey, make sure you count tempo out this way. Hey, make sure that you yell out enough. All right, you're going to demo the A series. So we kind of gravitated more towards that. And it's actually been beneficial because it's a little less time consuming for me, in terms of just doing a full sit down hour-long lecture. And I think it's just more immersive, and they get a little bit more involved and a little bit more out of it than just me preaching at them about how great Charles Poliquin is or something like that. So,
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. And you actually, with saying that, brought me back to one of the most important parts of my internship, right? Was when I had a mentor in an extremely loud weight room, right? And he gave me 2 racks to watch. And so I was watching them from behind, right? So I was looking to the right and then looking to the left. And he came up to me and he was aggressive, and, it is what it is, right? I love him to death.
mm-hmm.
He pulled me by the shirt and flipped me around, and he said, no, you need to watch it from the front. You need to watch so you can look at both racks immediately like this. He goes, and you need to yell. He's like, they can't hear you. He's like, he used a couple expletives within there as well. But, at the end of the day, he kind of embarrassed me, right? And I think he knew that's exactly what I needed, because I'm the type of person where if I get embarrassed, I want to step up and actually improve, right, and do better, because the players were kind of like snickering a little bit, and they're like, man, this guy got blasted in front of us, right? And so at the end of the day, though, that is what I think about back to my internship curriculum. And I think about those experiences, and when people taught me how to coach and how to control a room, how better, and just how to be more of a commanding presence and actually get something out of the session, versus just spending all my time trying to have the best program of all time. Right. And at the end of the day, why I love doing this podcast so much is because we don't necessarily talk about the X's and O's. We don't talk about programming a ton, because I think that's talked about. I think it's over discussed, in my opinion, just because I've never seen somebody lift weights and not get better, right, and not improve.
Right.
And so some programs are better than the others. There's no doubt. But at the end of the day, like, I think how the coach can actually impact it the most is through their sessions and how they control the sessions. So I love that approach to the intern program.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, from the professional standpoint too, like, I love that story, because I had a similar story to that. Where I still remember the first day I was given a clipboard at Syracuse, and and Coach E, also very aggressive, also quite intimidating person, former fighter, all that kind of stuff, could absolutely destroy me if he wanted to. He was out for, I believe it was a skin appointment or a dentist appointment, and I had to run the red shirt rack that he had, and it was bench day. And he's like, if you screw it up, I'm going to blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. But here's a clipboard. And so it was awesome, to the sense that, like being able to be in charge and actually feel like being part of staff and feeling like all your hard work, at that point, it was been, I've been there since like probably May or June. And this was like probably November towards the end, when they're all trying to PR. I was like, wow, this is like the Super Bowl for like the redshirt guys, and I'm in charge of one of the days. Like, that's huge. But yeah, he scared the living daylights out of me, put me in charge of that thing. But it's an experience that I'll take with me wherever I go. And so I try to put uh, these kids in similar situations, um, to where they have to succeed, or at least if they don't succeed, or if they don't have the want to succeed, then at least I know. Um, because my big thing, if I can't trust you, then I can't put you in charge of anything. So ultimately, I think it breeds those better conversations of like, because I've had a couple of them come up to me like, oh, so like, Ty, like, I'm trying, like I really am, but I'm panicking all the time. Like I don't know how to get better. Um, and I was like, because you're in that particular conversation, it was like, well, because you want to do well, right?
Mhm.
The only reason you're anxious is because you're trying to do well. You're trying to impress me, whoever's on the floor with you. But don't worry about doing that. Like worry about doing a good job because you want to do a good job, not for my sake or FAU's sake or the coach's sake. Do a good job for you, and then the rest will fall into place. And they've been doing a stellar job, bang up job since. And honestly, before that, I was like, I don't know if this person wants to be here, to be totally honest. And kind of stands in the corner, kind of doesn't really talk to anybody. Great at picking up and cleaning the weight room and stuff, but not awesome at the coaching side of things. And then we had that conversation, and I'm like, look, you're now going to be in charge of like two guys that are coming back and return to play setting. So you have to coach them. I actually can. I got 40 guys in here on a team lift. Like, you have to help me out. And she's done an unbelievable job since. Um, so I'm hoping that I can instill those things with our internship curriculum that like ultimately they can kind of take with them wherever they go.
And I think it helps you understand the longevity of their career as well too, right? Like
Only
I've had internships where we focused on the science side a ton. And again, I think those are very beneficial, and you have to know how to program. It's a part of the job. But at the end of the day, like my main frustrations, and I think a lot of strength coaches will relate with this, are not about the science side of strength and conditioning. It's almost
Mhm.
always about the art side. And so, what can you do with the art side, and what can you learn early on that'll help you understand how to approach these situations? Like I've got guys who I love to death, but their weights are never where I want them to be, right? They're for specific body weights or maybe the weights that they're lifting, right? And how do I approach
Mhm.
those conversations on a daily basis and not just let it beat me down? So, again, I'm always a big proponent of the art side. So I appreciate what you're doing there.
Absolutely.
No.
Yeah.
Well, Ty, man, I've had a fantastic time. Thank you for your time. I greatly appreciate it and getting to know you better. For anybody who wants to follow you on social media or catch up with your career, what would be the best way to do that?
Yeah. So again, I'm not good at the social media thing. I don't even know what my handle is, but it's Coach Ty 17 on Instagram. That's probably the best place to find me. I really don't do much in the way of Twitter or anything else. I'm trying to get better at it, but I'm not great about it. I also have a part time thing that I do on the side in terms of coaching, everything like that, and that's Mach 10 Human Performance, and that's at Mach 10 HP on Instagram. Again, that's pretty much the only social media outlet that I really use. Um, but you know, people can always get a hold of me via email or anything like that if they need anything, pertinent.
Yep. Excellent. Well, thank you, Ty. I appreciate it greatly.
Absolutely, Connor. I appreciate you having me on. This is awesome.
Absolutely.